My name's David Gonzalez. I'm an orthopedic technician. I got into it, finished school in 1990, worked in Hayward, Kaiser in the emergency department for 16 years, and then I transferred to Stockton for 7 years.
How long did you work for Kaiser overall?
23 years.
23 years.
So when you transferred into Stockton, what happened there that raised concerns to you about what was going on?
Well, when I first transferred to Stockton, there were two orthotechs. There were myself and another orthotech, Josh Brown. We were both 40 hours a week. Well, when Josh got the position of supervisor for our department, he said he was going to replace his position with somebody else at the beginning of the year. When the beginning of the year came, I asked him where the position was, and he said that he had never told me that before, that was a lie. I fabricated that.
Talk to him about how difficult it was with you working alone.
Yeah, so out of the 7 years I was there in Stockton, 4 years I worked by myself.
Management would have meetings, and they would say about how they're trying to stop sick time, and they have issues with people taking off, saying, you know, they're sick when they're not, and they're taking the FMLA. And so basically they kind of just warned us not to take any time off. And at that time, I had to go out and I had to get care.
Firing him.
Okay, don't-
And so I really had no choice. I needed to get my surgery.
Yeah, the cast room can tie up the doctor. It can make his day easier. It can make his day worse. If we're behind, the doctor's behind. And then that just slows down the day for everybody.
Just explain what kind of work you do and how difficult it is and how busy you were.
Applying casts, and in the podiatry department where we work, they used to put on these diabetic total contact casts that were very time consuming. They take like 45 minutes to an hour. And in that 45 minutes to an hour, you may have 2 or 3 casts come up, or cast removal, what have you, and by the time you're done with this 40-minute procedure, you got 3 people waiting, you know. So I could move really fast, you know. I mean, I could do it all day, but I ended up coming down with a neck and back injury in 2008, and I never took any time off work for it. I was put on modified duty in 2012 for it, but yeah, I forgot.
I mean, when you got these injuries, what did they say? I mean, you know,
In 2008, when I was diagnosed with this injury, I have the bones in my neck are squeezing on the spinal cord from repetitive bending, because this is the position we were normally in throughout the day, putting on casts on legs. Even if you're doing it on an arm, your head is bent like so. So
this is hard work.
yeah, a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of bending. Yeah. And so after repetitive motion like that, the bones in my neck are squeezing the spinal cord. Okay. And then the bones in my low back are causing sciatic pain. So the neck causes arm pain and the back causes...
And what was response of Kaiser to that?
Well, I was never put on any modified duty for that. I didn't request any until things got really bad. 2012, I started having pain 24 hours a day. You know, even though I told them working by myself, I'm just going to make the pain. I complained several times that I was going to injure myself further or injure a patient, because I was moving as fast as I could all day. You know, and for like 8.5, 9 hours, you move as fast as you can.
Explain to him how you talk to management about this issue.
Over and over. Actually, I've heard that they wanted to terminate me because I complained too much, because I constantly went to the union to show them numbers. Like, hey, I have one cast room schedule in Stockton, and they have one schedule in Modesto. And there's 3 orthotechs in Modesto, and I'm the only one in Stockton. And I was adding the numbers up, and we were just about dead even. And there's 3 in Modesto, and just myself in Stockton.
So they're killing you, basically.
Yeah, and I'd say just about every month. I mean, I would complain, and what really confused me, or what really got me upset, was that Kaiser had always been fair, you know, and these supervisors I had in Stockton were totally unfair. Never seen people actually lie to forward their career, you know?
To work?
It was surreal almost. It was unbelievable.
Had a couple of different times that he was gone. And of course, you know, like I said, we were extremely busy, a lot of doctors that we were working under. And so there was several times that Mary Carroll
That's
came
the
in.
manager for both of them.
Yes, came into the casting room and talked about how upset she was that Darrell was still off of work and that he was taking too much time off of work and that she was working on trying to fire him.
And on what basis? You know, she was looking for a pretext to fire him, or what do you mean? She was just.
She just said that he takes too much time off of
Do you-
work
do
and
you
she's
wanna
going
talk
to try
to
to
Darrell?
fire him.
Hi, Raven Sarnoff. I also represent the plaintiffs in this case. And we've discovered in discovery, we've received documentation which shows that the management's performance was heavily based on the attendance of the employees, and that includes time protected by law, such as for FMLA. And in addition to that, they also have a bonus policy which rewards financially the management for having good attendance by their employees, which also takes into account protected leave under the law.
Kaiser does not deny that they have this, what we consider illegal policy of rewarding managers for encouraging their employees to take time off work from protected leave.
I mean,
I've had patients complain to management that I've needed help. I had 2 patients. I told them not to, and they insisted, no, I'm gonna, because this is ridiculous, they'd say.
And what do they do, David, when
They-
they hired you? They marched you out in front of your patients,
Oh,
right?
the day I was suspended, I was escorted by security into the cast room where I had to walk through the waiting room, and the morning patients I had there, I had taken their cast off. They were waiting to have their cast put back on. Well, I got walked through the waiting room by security, and my patients were looking at me like, "Hey, David, what's up?" And I just shook my head and like
you
I
felt
didn't
like
know.
you were treated like a criminal.
Oh, and then when I was through the doors, all my coworkers were right there too, and they all watched me get escorted out.
How'd
And
you
then
feel
when I
about that?
went in the desk to get my wallet and keys, I tried to get my personal belongings, and he told me that no, that was Kaiser property. And so I just left with my keys and my wallet.
How did you feel about that? Did you feel like you were treated like
I
a criminal?
felt like I was treated like a criminal. Like I was telling you, the year before I was terminated, I started having pain 24 hours a day. The pain got really severe, and the occupational medicine doctors weren't helping me out.
Talk about April.
But then I went and saw my occupational medicine doctor the Friday before I was suspended, and I was put on permanent modified duty. And under the union contract, Kaiser's supposed to retrain. If you have modifications, they can retrain you in a job similar in pay and all that, but that's under the union contract. They're supposed to retrain us.
And what did they do? They fired you instead of retraining you?
Well,
Is that-
yeah, Friday I was put on permanent modified duty. On Wednesday morning, I was suspended.
And it seems like
Come up with the.
I didn't want to be on modified duty. I loved my job. That's all that time I didn't take off was for fear of losing my job, and I loved my job. I mean, I worked in pain. I didn't want to go on modified duty because I loved my job. And they just tried to work me until I would quit, or I don't think I hope they didn't want me to hurt myself, but you know, now I am. Now I'm in pain, chronic pain, 24 hours a day. It's been 5 years. Social Security's denied me. Nobody will hire me. I'm 53 and I have modifications.
Written up.
Never been written up in my whole career. You know, I had good attendance. My doctors like me. My patients like me. And management had been trying to get them to stop. Multiple emails were sent, meetings and stuff like that.
why were they doing that?
Why were the medical assistants writing in there?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it was just laziness. You don't have to go into another part of the chart to open up the
Because they're supposed to do
patient's
it on the
history.
doctor's chart, not the
Right.
orthotext.
Fill in what happened when you talked to Julie Kendricks in April.
So then they call it same time on our computer. I same time Julie Kendrick, and I said, "Hey Julie, there was 3 patients today seen in Modesto that were done by the medical assistants," and she said, "Well, how do you know that?" And I said, "Because I looked." And she said, "You looked at the charts?" And I said, "Yes." And then that was the end of the conversation. The next morning, I was called into the office and suspended. And then 10 days later, I believe I was terminated.
Just so
Never
you
been
know,
written
What
up.
did they say were the reason for your suspension?
that I violated HIPAA. I went into patient's chart without a medical or business need.
Without
But I
authorization.
did have a business need.
And you had authorization.
And you'd never been
23,
reprimanded or-
23 years, I never been
The assistant
supervisor in Modesto. So under our UBT agreement, it says if you see a problem in the department, you're supposed to identify it, maybe come up with a solution, and present it to your supervisor. Well, when I looked at the Modesto schedule, I had seen where 3 medical assistants had been charting in the classroom schedule, and they're not supposed to chart on our schedule. I brought to the attention Mary Carroll, who was our manager, our department manager. I told her I wanted to show her something that I have an idea that can help department flow, get the patients through quicker. I could restructure the cast room schedule because there was only 16 appointments throughout the day. I could restructure the cast room schedules for have available 5 or 10-minute appointments rather than every appointment being a 30-minute appointment. For example, if Dina gets a patient that needs their cast cut off, it's a 5-minute procedure, but they get a 30-minute appointment. So it didn't make any sense. And you couldn't really keep track of patients in real time, how busy the cast room was because their appointment may be throughout the day. And so I brought it to Mary Carroll's attention. I opened up a chart in her presence and showed her how I saw this and what the problem was. And I even came up with a solution for her. I said I would restructure the cast room if she would like me to. And she said yes. So we had a teleconference with all the techs in Modesto, and everybody agreed that I would be in charge of restructuring the cast room. So when I had slow time throughout the day, I would check the schedule, see how many cast cutoffs they had, and then write down average times it would take. Well, when I noticed on April, the week before I was suspended, the day.
So employees get a bonus if they don't call in sick or call off work, but it excludes if that call-ins or off work is for surgeries protected by law, protected leaves, FMLA. But management's bonus is based on both. It's based on people just calling off work, and it's based on people taking leaves that are protected by law. So I think that's what's so shocking about it, is that the unions have this agreement about attendance too, and it's perfectly appropriate to monitor attendance. But you can't monitor it when it's protected by law, because nobody can help if they have cancer. Nobody can help if they've got a disability, and that's protected. It's all
Figured
about
out.
the money. It's all about the money. It costs money to accommodate people with disabilities. It costs money to give people time off, and Kaiser's concerned about their bottom line.
Every morning when I came in, I would look at the doctor's schedule for any fracture that may be on his schedule that day, and open the chart, look at the fracture, and see if the patient needs to go to the operating room, which was in Modesto, or be seen by us in Stockton. So I would know what was coming in before it came in. And I would give one of my doctors, hey, you got a bad fracture that's going to need to be set, and just keep them informed and help keep the flow of patients going faster.
You have a T-shirt. Fear is for others. Are Kaiser workers, a lot of them, afraid to speak up because of
Yes.
what's happened to you? What is
Every one of my coworkers, the only one that would talk to my attorneys was Nathan, who was retired, and all the other coworkers that I worked with are afraid.
terrified?
They're afraid
Then if
they'll
they
get
speak out
terminated.
about-
I don't know if you can tell right now, I'm really shaking. I have anxiety panic disorder. And every time I would go to management and show them these numbers, and there's 3 in there, and they would just shrug their shoulders, I would have anxiety, a bad panic attack, and my anxiety got worse.
So it
the years.
seriously affected your mental health.
Oh yes, I get confused really easy now. You can ask me a question, and I get confused real easy. I've been throwing up in the mornings. It's just.
It's extremely devastating. I mean, you go from being a well-respected senior ortho tech, respected by physicians, able to get a job anywhere. I've also worked outside of Kaiser at MotoGP races at Laguna Seca
Before.
with Dr. Tang. He's one of the best orthopedic surgeons in the nation, or in the world for that fact. And you go from being somebody that you've accomplished your career, and you believe you're going to retire, and then all of a sudden you're in trouble for something you shouldn't be in trouble for, and then you're treated horribly, and then next thing you know, your family doesn't have a decent place to live. So you try to come back, you know, after living in the Valley, you come back to the Bay Area and you try to get a job out here. Well, the housing costs way outweigh, in my situation, because my wife doesn't work, there was no way I could afford to live out here again. So after a short period of time, naturally the boat flipped over and we lost our home, and then I'm homeless now. And not only am I homeless, I'm living with not even living, just occasionally have the right to stay with my stepdaughter at her house, and they moved to Oakland just so there'd be an extra room so we could sleep on the floor.
My daughter told me the same thing, that she has nothing with me. They're both in high school, both of my kids. So, you know, I spend every dime I get on my kids, and it's still not enough. But, you know.
Tell them about the difficulty we had in getting a job.
Oh, I have modifications, no repetitive bending, no repetitive reaching, no twisting, you know, and I'm 53 years old. I've applied, I even applied at a tire warehouse just to stack tires, and I can operate a forklift, but I had an interview for that job, $10 an hour, and I didn't get that job.
And how much were you making as a technician?
35 when I left.
It's been 5 years, and I cannot find, I do have a job, but I'm working on call. And for instance, working on call, I worked a total of 9 days last year. So I no longer can contribute to the household income. I can't help family members out. I have 2 daughters and 3 grandchildren. I have a grandson that's in college, so that's done. I ended up, because of all the stress, I ended up getting sick over it. So now I have a health issue that I'll have for the rest of my life, and which causes anxiety attacks, and it's been difficult.
How would you say this affected your life if you were to try and just tell them?
It's terrible. I mean, my passion is patient care. I love patient care. I'm a caretaker. That's my personality, and I miss it. You know, it's gone. You know, I'm almost 60 years old, and who's going to hire me now? You know, they're going to hire somebody younger than me. You know, and I miss it.
It's this Julie Kendrick thing, when she all of a sudden talked to him about opening the charts, it was this little thing that made them jump on compliance, but they knew about this.
Because
So
how else, for example, if a patient, like that's a really good example, because if a patient comes up to you and you have to check whether they were ordered, how else would that you do
I wouldn't
that?
know, and it would be over the telephone as well. I mean, and so they're saying we were in charts from Stockton. So for instance, if David's putting a long leg cast on a patient, that takes him, you know, quite a bit of time. So he's the only orthotech in Stockton, and the call center calls to the cast room for David, and he doesn't answer the phone. That phone call is immediately transferred to Modesto, so one of us 3 will answer that call. How can I help that patient? I have to get
Jamie,
the chart.
Andy, it was shocking to all of us. But when I first heard that this was it, I mean, we knew that they were encouraging people. We knew that they'd threatened people with time off. We knew they'd fired them because they were disability. That kind of stuff happens. But when we found this policy and we looked into it, I said, are you really sure this is what they're saying? And we verified it by managers, and we have 3 depositions under oath that says it. We've got their performance contracts, which says that they're doing this. So they will not deny they were doing this. As a matter of fact, their lawyers haven't denied it. But what they have said, well, it's just a minor thing. It's just one thing we look at in terms of reviewing all our managers. It's just one performance issue. But they will not deny that it is a performance issue. And so this has not been denied in court. The question is, they say it's not important, we say it's critical, and the proof's in the pudding. They fired 4 long-term workers who all had good records. They didn't fire them for performance. They fired them for a very phony reason about this HIPAA that we haven't gotten into. We can prove unequivocally that the violations of this HIPAA did not happen.
Why don't you talk about what the HIPAA thing was? Do any of you want to talk about that?
Well, they're saying that we got into patients' charts without the need. I mean, there's all different kinds of, for instances, about getting into a patient's chart, and we were never, after David was terminated in April of 2013, then management said everybody needs to be careful about getting into patients' charts. Well, what's that mean? Well, if a patient walks up, and this happens quite often, a patient walks up into the orthopedic department and says, I'm primary care sent me over here for a brace. Well, I can't do anything to any patient unless there's an order from their physician. So I could get into the chart and say there's no order, patient's got to go back to the primary care. Now I've closed that chart. So I didn't make a note. I was never instructed to make a note. So now I'm being accused of being in patient's charts, but there's all different kinds of reasons for being in a patient's chart. It's not like I was from a different department. Every chart that I've been in was from orthopedic
It's for your work
It's
needs.
right,
Did
correct.
you have,
They talk about how terrible the HIPAA violations were, but we provided you documents here to show that one, they never did anything like this with anybody before. Secondly, why did they have to fire them? If they really thought they did something wrong, why didn't they warn them? They had a right under the union contract to two things. One, progressive discipline, and two, only to be fired for just cause. And all they did is just run it through and railroaded them into a termination. They never needed to terminate them. If they wanted to do something, they give them an oral warning, a written warning. I mean, the most that they gave these people who even went into records outside the agree is a 5-day suspension. Look at them time and again. They denied that they did this. So their pretext for the termination is a very weak point for them, and they've got a lot of problems. Why the pretext? Comes right back again. They wanted to fire Darrell. He was taking too much work off. They were starting to break down. Our theory is that they broke them down. They worked hard. Once they were kind of broken, they decided to get rid of them. And then what did they do? They hired younger, new workers to take their place.
There's been 2 since I left, and they're having trouble keeping up.
so there was serious staffing problems.
Yes.
By the fact that they had to hire 2 to replace the one.
There
that
was never one before me. There was always 2, and since I've been gone, there's always been 2 since I left.
Discrimination cases like this, whether age discrimination or disability, it's always about the money. It's not that they don't like disabled people. It's about the bottom line. See, the Kaiser, the management's looking and say, well, if we can not make them work, we can all make a little more money. We all get a little bigger bonus. Let's just. It's all Kaiser's about the bottom line. They're not about patient care when it's all said and done with it. It's money comes first. Patient care.
It's supposed to be a nonprofit.
The term is profits before people. Now the bottom line. Kaiser started in Oakland. This is their home base. This is why we are in Oakland instead of being in the Valley. We fought that to come here. Kaiser is the largest employer in Oakland. They are the biggest employer in Oakland. They're the most important healthcare organization in the East Bay, and they should be setting the pace and the tone for. And instead, what are they doing? They're treating good long-term employees like this for the bottom line. It is profits before people. It is wrong. We're suing them for punitive damages, and we're going to prove our case. And the only thing that's going to make any difference to them is a verdict to make them pay. And it's about awareness. I don't think the vast majority of Kaiser people would have no idea what's going on here. They have to make their decisions as to whether this is a healthcare organization that they like and trust, or whether they want to continue to work with them, or they want to find healthcare elsewhere. And if they find that this is the way they're treating their employees, I tend to think they might take a second look at being Kaiser members. Workers and bring in
And you have
new
a
ones.
union contract that says you have to go through due process procedures. What happened?
After the second step, it's supposed to go to arbitration after the second step. After the second step, they denied us that, so I would try to contact the union, email them, call them. They never returned my calls. They just dropped me. I went to their office. There was never anybody
Who was
there.
that? They don't go through
They
due
had
process.
union reps that came in and argued for them at the time that the human resources investigation was going in. They came in, they could do their best to try and explain to management as to why these were not violations, and particularly they all argued that they should have gotten what they call last chance agreements. The last chance agreements are back to progressive discipline. Why didn't they give them oral warning, written warning, or at worst, a 5-day suspension? And so the union did try to argue that early on. After that happened, I think there was frustration, but at that stage, the decision was made, rather than trying to go into union grievances, they felt that the best remedy, and I agree with them, was to just file wrongful termination actions and go outside.
You did file grievances. You filed
We
grievances.
did,
They didn't
but-
pursue them.
No,
What-
they
what
didn't.
happened?
They didn't. I never heard from them again. It was over. I didn't even get a second step. I just got talked to and then I got fired, and that was
Which
it.
is illegal under the union contract.
And yes, they're supposed to help. That's why we paid union dues. Gave them lots of money for nothing.
Yeah.
They offered me to resign. The day I was terminated, she called in, said if I would resign, then they would allow me to, and I told her I wouldn't admit to doing anything wrong because I didn't do anything wrong. And that's why I decided to fight it.
So there was an agreement, or a proposed settlement.
They tried to get me to
Just walk
to
away.
resign.
Like,
Yeah,
vol-
just
yeah. So
voluntarily
that it looked like
resign.
you
But then you wouldn't have a legal basis to sue.
It wasn't right. I wasn't gonna. That would be like admitting to doing something wrong. I didn't do anything wrong.
Well, I refused to sign my termination papers. I just wouldn't even acknowledge it, because what I was accused of, I did not do.
And they waited 5 years. The damages are very significant because they all have significant loss of earnings. Under the law, they have the right to the following. They have a right to all their economic losses, that is their past and future loss of earnings and benefits. Secondly, they have a right to their loss of their life values, what we call emotional distress. It's been very difficult on all of them. It's ruined their lives. They have a right to get damages for that. They may have a right to attorney's fees if we win it. We share that with our clients, but they have a right to attorney's fees. And lastly, if we can prove that Kaiser's conduct was malicious and intentional, we have a right to punitive damages. So that's what we're suing for.